Welcome to this segment. In the first chapter, we are going to be looking at performance hierarchies, and that's very important because, because if nothing else, it's just the way the world works. It's about how the different layers of how you enforce status upon people, and in the corporate sector, we call this performance hierarchies. That's what we're going to take a look at now. Let's see. Okay, so this is a good snapshot, right? It's this breakdown in an organization in terms of the different levels: strategic level, tactical level, and operational level. So obviously, the people. One thing you have to understand is that the people and the responsibilities attached to each of these different levels, it's completely different, right? You cannot really. So what they think about, for example, what you find a director at the strategic level is thinking about is not what a junior or executive in the operation level is worried about or concerned about. So there are so many differences in that sense. That is important. That is point number one, definitely. Now, in the context of planning and control, which is fundamentally what strategic design involves, you have to plan and you have to implement, and the implementation has to be a controlled implementation because you want things to go the way you want them, right? Not the way somebody else wants them, not the way the competitor wants them to go. Now, in this process, each of these different levels have their own responsibilities, have their own functions and roles to play. If they don't really function and if they don't do their job properly, if one fails, the entire system, or there is a risk of the entire system crashing. Now, the risk, of course, at the lower level, operational level, is quite low because the roles can be replaced. So, if someone is not, doing their job well, you just have to replace them with another person, because most of the tasks that get happened in the operational and now the managerial level also are not very intelligence driven, not very decision driven, not very thought driven work. So it's kind of repetitive, it's kind of doing the same thing. So that kind of stuff you can really replace and get things done if there's a poor performer. But mostly at the top level, at the strategic level, this is not that simple, because there's a lot of creativity, a lot of thinking, a lot of independent work, a lot of leadership, the kind of skills that you cannot really communication, bringing people together, driving people, motivating people. So this kind of thing, it's not really easy to replicate. So that is why you also see that a lot of the control, bulk of the control effort really goes to the lower levels, because they are the ones who have a wider breakdown, a segmented breakdown, a more detailed version of the work. So you have to do each of the little tasks. You have tons of people. This is why you have companies with 10,000, 20,000 employees, because bulk of the people are in the lower levels and they have little things to do compared to what the top level do. So you have a few people sitting at the top making most of the money, but doing work that is kind of, we can say, irreplaceable, not in entirely, but there is a uniqueness to the what they bring to the table. Now, if we take a look at further breakdown along those lines, what APM does is it does offer you a better understanding of how each of these levels operates, right? How the strategic, tactical, and operational level operates. So you can go through the table. Um, Overall, of course, you have to understand that each of the levels have to be mission aligned, that all of them have to work toward the mission. In terms of time frame, the focus, it can vary between long term thinking to short term thinking across the levels. So the scope, when you make a decision, the junior executives may worry only about their particular task. A tactical functional manager might worry about their function. If they are HR managers, they're going to worry about HR. They're not going to be concerned about marketing or finance, or doesn't matter, because they have their focus. But the more, or the higher you rise, like a director, your concerns are bigger, right? You might be a CXO, and yet you cannot really think on your own terms, because your responsibility is just driving the company share price up, and that means broader thinking. So even if you're a COO, it is very important that you take the CFO's thoughts and opinions into account and incorporate them in your decision making. Because there has to be a good kind of alignment across each other who are at the strategic level. The way information gets used, the quality of the information, the type of information, the level of information, it's the level of detail attached to the information also gets uh, or becomes different across each of the levels, and relative significance of planning against controlling. So bulk of the planning work is at the top tier, at the strategic tier, and bulk of the controlling work, which is related to the functions, which is related to getting the work done in itself, by and in itself, is at the lower tier. So you can take a look at that. That brings me to another important concept. It's this conflict between strategic and operational. You see, as I said, I've continuously pointed out this difference between how the strategic level thinks and how the operational level thinks. Because the operational level, due to various reasons, like for example, the fact that they make much less than those who are at the top make. What happens is that the junior executives, the operational level staff, they make barely enough money to keep their life afloat. So of course they will be concerned with the short term decisions. They will be concerned with the short term salary and the bonuses and that kind of thing, because they're barely managing. But the strategic level, for example, people at the strategic level, they make more than, at times I would even say, they deserve. So they don't really have to worry about something as personal as how am I going to survive the next month. They don't have to worry. So of course they have that freedom, because what happens in the context of the company is that the strategic level is thinking long term, because for the long term they are set. Their personal problems are okay for the long term. They basically, let's say they're set for 1 year ahead. They don't have to worry too much about their own issues. So, of course, on behalf of the company, they tend to be able to think for the long term. But whereas you take the operational members, because of various constraints, like the personal one that I gave you as an example, their concerns are more short term. And what does this do? It can create a conflict. It can create a conflict because their thinkings are different. So, this is important for you to understand. Which is what has been explained here. It really boils down to what I said. End of the day, whatever Kaplan and the UK based study text systems try to imbue, what happens ultimately is this: that the concerns, that what the thinking the operational level people can do on behalf of the company is not that far, because they have short term concerns with their personal well being. But with the strategic level, that is not the case, because for the long term they are set, their personal well being is assured, so that that burden is taken off their heads. So they come very happily to work, and they start, on behalf of the company, they start thinking long term. Essentially what happens, and this creates this conflict. So you can take a good read about it. um, of course, in addition to that, I can say that there can be other challenges. It can be intellectual capacities, because there can be the wrong people in the wrong place. There can be really smart individuals at the shorter, or at the lower end of the company. People, I've seen people who've, just because they're good, they don't get promoted. The reality, right? Because they know that if they get the chance, they will far exceed the expectations, and they will go beyond what they are capable of. But beyond that, there are personal reasons, there are issues that happens in terms of results, in terms of how flexible people are, in terms of the leadership skills, the broader leadership of the CEO, the mandate of the shareholders. So all of these things also can come into play, but mostly it's the difference between the short term vision that the lower levels have versus the long term vision of the higher levels. um And that also, I also want to take a look at one more thing. Okay, so here we go. So when it comes to a performance hierarchy, another important aspect is the performance management within the hierarchies itself, because we are in APM, right? How do we manage performance? Very fundamental to that aspect is that you cannot really manage performance in a uniform way. You cannot, it's not consistently applied. It cannot be. You know, the way you measure performance of the lower level cannot be used really to measure the performance of the higher level. Of course, in addition to this, there are general challenges like what is controllable to people, really demarcating that line, drawing the line between controllable to non-controllable, because you should, if you are judging performance of someone, you should be judging them based on what you can control or what they can control. But so that is a fine line. So there are challenges like that, but mostly what you have to understand is that because of the planning is different across the three levels: operational, tactical, and strategic. The control aspect is different. Similarly, therefore, because of that, the performance management, performance measurements, the performance metrics that get used, if you want to assign critical success factors, because of the length or the vision that each of the levels have differently, um, the KPIs, the critical success factors, the actions that each of those levels take also have to differ. So that's another important thing that you have to understand about performance hierarchies, which is important as far as a company and leadership is concerned. It's very important. It's a very good system also. In any case, what happens is that as an organization, when people gather together to go toward an objective, not everyone can run the company, right? Obviously, right? You can't have a company of 100 people and you can't have all 100 of them crying out to be the CEO. That doesn't work like that. So it's really about ensuring how the leadership structure across these different levels, the operational, tactical, and strategic work. But I have to add to that that this is a very common and typical approach of looking at a company. Now, of course, nowadays with the current world, there are so many alternate approaches where you don't really have this three-tier pyramid kind of setup. There are organizations that differ and they have very different functions. I think there are big companies which have, but a leader and a follower is common, right? At a departmental level, at a functional level, at a company level, at a SBU level, that of course it has to be there, right? Without that, there's really no consistency in how the company is trying to achieve its mission and vision. So that's this segment, performance hierarchies. I'll see you in a different video. Thank you so much.